Hello, hello. Welcome to African Literature Analysis series. I call it a series because we're going to be looking at a couple of African works, African genius works by, some of my favorite African authors. Now, my name is Twaita Joingesi. I am a master's graduate in educational leadership, as well as almost a master's graduate in business administration, still in pursuit of the second master's qualification. I also am an educator. I've been educating in the field of American literature, and I have developed this interest. I must admit, I have not really been much in African literature, and my background in American literature and in such literature and such concepts has just given me that interest. I want to actually discover myself. So this is a journey of learning for myself, and I'd like to make my contribution and help someone else out there, a young person, a student who could be going through and in need of such academic information. And so I've structured this course, to align more on the academic aspect of things, which is why we're going to be discussing the plot, the theme, the setting, and such academic information. This first part would be the background. Okay, so the series is divided into two parts. The background of the author, the background of, the geographical location, Nigeria, and such information, the summary of the entire book, as well as we look into the academic aspect. So to ensure that we understand, what message was being conveyed by Professor Chinua Achebe through his book. So stick around, and I absolutely welcome your views and contributions as well, as we are both in this learning experience to share what you also are finding of more interest, and let's continue this journey of learning together. All right. Thank you once again for joining. If you have not already, do like, subscribe, press the share button. Let's inform more people, and let's help other people who could be in need of this information as well, as we are on this journey of learning together. So what we'll be covering in the section, okay, we start off, like I said, with a brief background of Professor Chinua Achebe. This is quite important because, the author's background does influence how they write. It does influence how, they deliver their message. It does influence even the message that they have to deliver. Their own life experiences do have a way of contributing to that as well. So we're going to look briefly into their background. I want to know who Professor Chinua Achebe is, and why he decided to go the route that he decided, and why, he decided to share the particular message that he shared at the time at which he shared it by. So we'll be looking at that, as well as we're looking at a summary of Things Fall Apart, in case somebody, read the book a while back and you would like to be, refreshed, or what exactly was the book all about, because there was a point where everybody, we all were learning about this book, and we're quite young, right? And so it could be that you once went through this book when you were young and many years back, and you would like to just have a bit of a refresher, like what was this story actually about? So we'll be giving a short summary of what the book is all about, sharing a bit of the important highlights and some things that you definitely want to take note of as you're going through the book. Plot analysis. Now, this is more on the academic part of things. We want to analyze the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, the resolution. We want to understand the themes. Okay, so there are major themes. There are some sub-themes which are being discussed in the book as well. We want to look at those, and we want to see, how they, they can be of relevance, to us as an African community, if I can be more specific like that. As well as we will be looking at the setting. There is a strategic, use of the setting, and it's quite important that we take note of that as well, especially for academic purposes. And I'll add a bit of a bonus recap, sharing my views, as well as if you have any questions, there'll be a Q&A section. There are some questions which already had been asked in a different, discussion of this book. So we'll be discussing those questions. And if you have any more questions, if you have any comments, share them in the comment section below. Once again, do like, subscribe, share this information. Let's continue to grow in this platform together and make an impact, of our African works together. Okay, brief background. We said brief, okay, emphasis on the brief. So we'll be looking at his lifetime of Professor Chinua Achebe. We'll be looking at geographical influences, political influences, religious influences, popular works, international awards, as well as top 10 genius views. Okay, some of the views and the contributions that he has made. There's a lot, so we just have chosen 10 for the purpose of this particular series. Okay, Professor Chinua Achebe was born in Nigeria in 1930, lived about 82, maybe even 82 and a half years until 2013, where he passed on in Massachusetts. Something that's noteworthy about him is that he lived a purpose-driven life. You get some people who have this purpose. Well, we all have a purpose in life. You get some people that actually fulfill their purpose in life, and you get others who don't, and they pass on with their purpose not being fulfilled. When we look at Professor Chinua Achebe's life account, you get to see that this man identified from a young age what it is that he wanted to do. As a matter of fact, he did not really, venture in so many different courses and career paths, but he was focused. When he saw what he wanted to do, when he saw the impact that he wanted, to contribute in and towards, he just gave himself fully into that. Now it's quite interesting. He initially had been studying medicine. He was accepted. He was funded to study medicine. He dropped out from that, wanting to pursue literature, because again, this is something that seemingly was a bigger purpose of his, and fortunately his family was able to assist him, fund him when the scholarship that he received was no longer going to fund his new course. But from what he did, we see something very much remarkable about him. There's this passion that he has for literature. He doesn't just write for the sake of writing. He's writing because he genuinely has a message to share with the rest of the world. And that is seen because, a lot of times when there will be, areas of controversy, when there was civil wars going on, he uses his tool. He uses, his message to make a difference. So he becomes an activist against, the civil unrest which was taking place in Nigeria. It would have been easier for him to just be quiet and just focus on himself and his career, but he decides that he has a message, he has something bigger to contribute, and so he uses that, his message, and that's how he gets to be known, and he gets to be both appreciated and in some cases, provocative towards other people, because he's speaking his mind, he's addressing, what needs to be addressed, even though it's uncomfortable at times. He contributed his vast experience towards Black consciousness. He voiced his opinion a lot through writing. There was a case where an author, by the name Mr. Conrad, where he published a book and which was dehumanizing Africans. And Professor Chinua Achebe sees this and he decides, no, I cannot keep quiet. I have to speak up for my people. I have to raise my views. I have to use the tools that I have to make a contribution. I think that on its own, it shows us an example, a positive example, that whatever we have, we can never say we can't make a contribution, or we can't, influence change because of certain limitations. Whatever we have, we can use to make a difference in the world, especially when we give ourselves fully and we make sure that, we are actually, living out fully what we're supposed to be living. And so here, Professor Chinua Achebe is able to use his writing, to voice out his opinion. He writes an essay, it becomes received, and, the message again is conveyed that Africans, let us be taken, as a people that have got esteem. Let us be, taken as a people who have a positive contribution, who have got values, who actually deserve as much respect as everybody else does. And let's stop being looked down upon as a people. So he speaks, he addresses this in so many different ways. And, amongst the many, many ways that he's remembered for one who actually speaks and he stands up for principle. Another way that he was doing that was when he would not accept an award which he felt was not done in accordance to, his principle. So this was a person who was very much principled. This was a person who stood up for the truth, who wrote, to address the truth, though uncomfortable as it was at times. So there's a lot that we look up and we admire Professor Chinua Achebe for, because he was not. We could say maybe he represents, the smaller proportion of people who stand up boldly for the truth. So he co-founded Publication Press to continue the legacy of literature. Again, because he understands the value of literature, he wanted to ensure that more people, younger people after him, he wanted to pass on the baton to ensure that more people are going to continue this legacy of African literature, right? And so he co-founds that and with other writers to make an impact. And he uses his influence and opportunity to bring about change for Nigerians, for Africans in totality. So that's how he gets to be one who is appreciated by not just Nigerians, but by the whole world. Even outside or out of Africa, he's well appreciated because he made his contribution also in the University of Massachusetts, where he was lecturing as a professor and contributing more of his expertise there as well in a very principled manner. So one thing I definitely will always remember about Professor Chinua Achebe is that he was principled. He stood up for his values. He spoke up, when it was needed, right? And he held nothing back, and I think that is a trait which a lot of our leaders can definitely learn and take from and continue. Let's take that as well. Let's take such virtues as well, as part of the legacy that we have to share with the next generation. Because I feel as the African community, we need more such people. We need to be people who all contribute towards that, to make a bigger difference for our cause as Africans in general. One's geographical location has a way of influencing and even shaping, their understanding and their perception and their ideologies of life. So Professor Chinua Achebe was born in Nigeria, he lived in Nigeria, studied in Nigeria. He was privileged to tour with fellow writers in the United States. He got to have this international exposure, which is good because it is a way of just shaping you and helping you to see, the world from a different perspective. Especially when on tour, he was also going and sharing some of his findings and lecturing and sharing some teaching. So it was a learning and a teaching experience for him as well, which definitely has a way of shaping one's mindset. So by the time he returns back to Nigeria, he worked in Enugu as well, lived and worked in Enugu, and he co-founded a publishing press. The Civil War took place. His friend died in such a war, in which case he also became quite vocal. He became an activist, speaking out, this is not right. And he again goes to the States to source assistance. That there's a lot of unfairness happening in Nigeria, and speaking up and also allowing Nigeria to sort of be understood by the rest of the world and have better opportunity to be assisted by other parts of the world as well. So this was a person who was influenced by both these cultures, by both these surroundings, and we see that in some of his work as well, where a lot of his writers, will have some form of international exposure. Either if it's whether it's if it's going to Britain or any other part of the continent other than Africa. So he himself has been shaped by that. He has seen value in that. He has an academic mindset. He has a teaching background, and he's able to to infuse that in his work. And so this is some of the geographical influences that we see that have shaped the work of Professor Chinua Achebe. Unfortunately, we can't overlook the fact that there was a lot of politics happening in this time period as well. In the 19th century, there was a lot of colonialism, primarily from the British, empire. Great Britain was just out there, making their mark in many different parts of the African continent. In other continents as well, not just in the African continent. So there was this craving, this urge for just this power. So there was a lot of that going on in that time period. And so a lot of the politics taking place were primarily being influenced by that. So there were a lot of British armed forces which were fighting against kingdoms which resisted the missionaries. So, the British were bringing missionaries. The missionaries are coming, seemingly coming in peace. They're bringing the Bible. We come in peace. Give us a portion of your land. We want to build our church. We also want to bring our administration. So they were coming in peace, but at the same time, if it was resisted, it was not peace anymore. It was war. So it was sort of like, forced peace, right? And so there was a lot of that also going on. And so when the book talks about that, this is an actual account which occurred, and the writer is able to write, from the point of view of those who experienced this, of those who lived and were affected by this, because it was a power that was coming from, the higher powers, call it that. And so there was a lot of that going on. There were treaties which were formed in favor of the British rule and dominance. Again, it appears as a treaty, but at the same time, there's a machine gun, to enforce that this is going to happen this way. So in my understanding, it's no longer necessarily a treaty anymore. It is something which is being forced. You're obliged to just adhere to what's being said if you want to keep your life. But at the same time, it is a treaty because, hey, it has to be signed as if there's an agreement, because it's going to affect many, many generations down the line. So the British law introduced and it was enforced. There was, the colonial administration was also being introduced. Some parts of communities which were united were broken and divided, right? The segregation and the sub-segregation, introduction of hate amongst African people. All of this was taking place in that time period, and this also we see as shown or showcased in the works of the writer. And there was also some nationalism, imperialism, capitalism, and neo-colonialism taking place, So the British essentially wanting to come and introduce what it is they want, and ensuring that the locals, in this case, we're going to say the Nigerian community is going to even assist them, right? You're going to assist us. You're going to fight our wars, okay? You have to be loyal to us. You're going to be on our side, okay? We are now going to be one nation. We have the same administration. Your leaders have signed this treaty. So you are obliged to be on our side, to fight with us. You die, in assistance of our cause, okay? As well as we benefit, by the way, when the funds and stuff, they continue to benefit. And even the neo-colonialism, right? So even new administration that comes in, they have got to adhere to what already was being, established under force. So there was a lot of this going on, which was quite unfair. There was a lot of bribery, a lot of leaders which were supposed to have stood their ground, which were supposed to have, been principled, which were not, accepted some bribes, okay? And it affected a lot of things, and it just created this system of disunity, the system of corruption, the system of unfairness, the system of favoritism. Who are you? Where are you? Who do you know? What do you have? What influence do you have? Which white person is on your side? Who's funding you? There's a lot of those things which sort of have made a chaos of the system, which was supposed to have been a system, intended to assist the people. So now, at the end of the day, the people were the ones who were suffering, and there's this power that's been introduced. So we see this, also being showcased in some of the works of the writers, and it's quite important that we understand what was happening at the time, so we understand, what the author, the message the author is trying to bring across as well. So yes, this is these are some of the political influences which we see having taken place in that time period. In the case of Professor Chinua Achebe, we see that he was raised in the Igbo culture. He was raised in his cultural teachings, and the arrival of the missionaries occurred when he was already, above 7 years of age. So he started learning English at about the age of 8, and so he already had formed his own, understanding of the Igbo culture. He already had his cultural understanding. He already was well, taught in the cultural way before the arrival of the missionaries, or before the influence of the missionaries. And so by the time he went and he learned in the missionary schools, and by the time he was being taught that the African way is barbaric, by the time all of that happened, he already had his own understanding. He already had formed his own conclusion of the Igbo culture and of who he was. And so that helped him to be able to, to sort of make a distinction between, okay, this is the missionary way and this is the Igbo way, and I'm able to make an independent decision, based on these two teachings. And so when the missionaries arrived, and they were, again teaching that the cultural way is barbaric, children should move away from that. This is, God wants things to be done in this kind of a way. People should, follow the way of God and let go of anything else, of cultural norms, and anything other than God is sinful, right? And there was this disunity that was being introduced, okay? And again, in the shared values of the community, of the culture at the time, the people and their understanding, there was now this divide, right? Some people are saying, no, but this has made sense. We've been following our forefathers. This is how we've been doing things, for decades, right? And on the other hand, someone says, no, but this is the right way of doing things. And by the way, that this was sort of being forced. Okay, so there was this disunity in shared values. There was this, divide that was being introduced. And so Professor Chinua Achebe got to observe, okay, both sides of the spectrum. You got to see, the cultural way, you got to see the religious way, and was able to make his independent conclusion. And so later on in life, when later interviewed, he shares a more liberal approach, where he is more unrepresentative of religion, but more, he strongly supports the Igbo culture. He does not really fully agree with all of what the missionaries were teaching, but he does believe in the ways of culture. He does believe in the ways of unity. He does believe in the ways of, there's a word in Xhosa, which is Ubuntu, right? Which is, we are we are one another because of one another. Okay, this is now a broad translation of what it means. But the concept, which is an African concept, explains that as Africans, we are intended to be there and assist one another, and not, to disperse and just, and lead independent lives aside from each other. But we're supposed to be there and take care of each other. Grandparents, young people, old people. We are there as a community, neighbors, right? We're there to help one another as a people. And so that was his approach later on in life. When asked, his views, he supports the views of culture more than the views of what religion was introducing to their community. Now, Professor Chinua Achebe, one of his first, most popular, well, even the first popular novel was Things Fall Apart. It's quite interesting because in an interview he shares that it was not his first, novel. There was one before which really didn't, which was more like a practice run. And so this one was the one, that he knew, the system. This was the first one where he actually understood what he was doing. But there was a practice run one before. And, when we go through the book and you understand it, you get to see, again, it shares a lot of what was going on in that time period. And more of his works, A Man of the People, for example, also addresses corruption, right? So they talk of what was going on at that time, because this was something which was going on, which he actively was speaking against. And even towards his later years, he still felt as if, more could have been done to address, all of what is happening, which is wrong in the Nigerian political system, or even in the African political system, with the introduction of corruption and leaders who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So there's a lot of work that he did, there's an element of consistency. You see, there's an element of consistency. The message that he has was a strong message, and he found ways to, to address this message, to keep on, addressing this message, and to ensure that it's understood that he speaks against this quite vehemently. And so these are some of his popular works. There are also some poems that he wrote. There's also essays that he wrote. So there's a lot more that he has done. Okay, and most importantly, it's his own life as an example, because he was not hiding behind, the written work, but whenever you would ask him, whenever interviews were done, he actually addresses the same things that he writes about. So this is a message that he genuinely felt so strongly about. And it's a message that he carried through, which he really feels, something needs to be done about. So I really admire him for his principled, nature. I really admire him particularly for that. And so these are some of his works, and there's a lot more that we can learn from Professor Chinua Achebe. So in the year 1999, he received the St. Louis. Okay, so he received the St. Louis Literary Award. 2002, received the Peace Prize of the German Book Trade. In 2007, he received the International Booker Prize, as well as in 2010, he receives the Dorothy and Lillian Gish Prize. Now, this is quite interesting because considering that he was living both in Nigeria as well as in the USA, there were some awards, or there was a particular award which he received from his local country, from Nigeria, which he refused twice because of addressing that, well, I cannot receive an award, when I have addressed an issue, which this award is going to overlook, and the issue is still not being addressed. And so, it actually stood out when he refused to receive, an award from his own home country, and saying, up until, some of the issues that I've addressed have been solved, I cannot accept such an award, because it just means that the impact, what I'm trying to achieve has not been achieved. How can I receive the award? So it is quite interesting. He did not, see awards as, this is something, also a huge privilege that I'm supposed to be receiving. But he honestly associated it with, something that he would have earned, that he would have worked towards. And so if he felt as if he did not, his contribution was not yet enough or sufficient, he was not accepting the prize. I thought that, again, is quite remarkable about him. And this is something that I think, it speaks a lot about the person and his principled nature. Okay. If nothing else, hopefully, from all that he kept on addressing, from all that he stood for, hopefully something will be done, something more will be done to address the pending issues that he has been speaking, and speaking that we address. And now, again, these are not issues which are particularly unique to just Nigeria. A lot of them are issues which are, affect a lot of even the African continent, and even the whole world in some cases as well, because this is something that is quite unfortunate that we find ourselves living with nowadays. Okay, here's a summary. Things fall apart. I'm actually excited about this part. Okay, so it begins with us understanding Okonkwo's background. We see how he was raised by a father. His father, Onoka, died when he was pretty young. When he was very young, his father dies and he leaves him with nothing, okay, and no inheritance, no positive legacy, but he leaves him with debt, and he leaves him, he dies a very humiliating death. And so all his life, Okonkwo wants anything and everything, not to do with his father, Unoka. Okay, he doesn't want to be like his father Unoka. He wants nothing associated with his father Unoka. If it was from his father, he wants nothing to do with it. And instead, he develops this understanding that, no one is going to be there for me. No one has paved the path for me. No one has made the path easier for me by setting an inheritance, at least. I'm in this world by myself. I need to, and I will only make it in this world through my own efforts. So I will be my own savior. He grows up with that understanding, and it informs the way he conducts himself, So he gives himself, he's very much determined, he's a hard worker, he works hard in the field, he works hard, he's well respected in the community because of just the way he conducts himself. He's a man of integrity, he's a man of hard work, okay, and consistency. Now, this is something that we learn about Okonkwo. Already when we're starting the novel, we're seeing how, one cannot sit back and say, how I started in the world is how I'm going to end up. No, Okonkwo shows that how you start in the world is essentially how your parents brought you here. But it's not how your life is, necessarily going to be. You have a way to influence your life. There's something that you can do about it. So, from earlier on, we see how Okonkwo, is taking that stance, and he's just doing something to make his life more meaningful. And so his life becomes meaningful. And in the values of their community, there's the fictional village Umofia, all of this is valued, the hard work. People know, how lazy his father was, and they see how different Okonkwo is, and they respect him for that. He is very much, awarded for his effort and for his zeal and his determination. He is very much awarded, and all of that is in line with the shared values of the community of the people of Umofia. Okay, so more people in Umofia believe that if you want something done, you need to do something about it. There's that shared value, amongst the people, and especially the leaders and the influential people of the community. So that's Okonkwo. However, he has a weakness, his status. Okay, so when he wants sometimes to express himself, when he's in anger, he resorts to violence because he's not able to express himself fully, okay? But he still has this urge to want to express himself and to be heard and to be understood, okay? This is very much important to Okonkwo, given the way, where his life had begun. Now, he establishes himself, he has a very good compound. His compound becomes also quite central in a lot of the activities of the community. And he has 3 wives. We don't really know much about the first wife, or at least even her name, but we know that she's the mother of Noye, his first son, okay? And the second wife, Ikwefu, is the mother of Ezinna, okay, who becomes his favorite daughter. And then there's also the third wife, or Diego, okay? We don't really, again, know much about her, except, she's the one that gets, to be the victim in the Peace Week when Okonkwo is enraged and he takes it up on her, and it becomes a bit of an issue. But yes, all of these are accounts that help us to understand, the life and the character of Okonkwo and how he leads his life and how he runs his family, his very own compound. So he's an autocratic leader. He's very strong in how he does things. And naturally, he has issues with his son, Noye, because Noye grows up to being sort of like the opposite of his father. He's not as, aggressive in his approach. He's softer in approach. And his father, Okonkwo, fears that this boy is going to be like Unoko. He reminds me of my father, Unoko. I hate this about this boy. However, when he looks at Ezinma, who is the daughter, Ezinma shares of the spirit of Okonkwo, and Okonkwo loves Ezinma, and he appreciates Ikwefu more because of Ezinma. And Ikwefu has had this very, very sad ordeal of losing all her children, okay? So all her children, she would lose them through miscarriage or some unfortunate experience, and about 10 of them she's already lost. And so by the time Ezinma comes, there's this fear that let's pray that she stays. Let's pray that she lives, and she doesn't die at a younger age than all the other ones do. And so, there's this fear, and they're very much protective over Ezinna because of the fact that there's this, condition that keeps on occurring, but also because now Okonkwo loves the spirit of Ezinna. Ezinna even understands Okonkwo. They just understand each other very well, as if they share the same spirit. And so they're very much protective of Ezinna. They consult the oracle, who is an elderly woman, by the way, an ordinary elderly woman who has been widowed, who's a widow, and she, however, has got spiritual powers. Okay, she becomes possessed by certain spirits sometimes, and when she is possessed, she ends up, having supernatural powers and has the ability to do things which, not even a man could do sometimes. She just becomes overcome by certain powers, and so she's known for such powers, and she's not questioned. She's one person that even in some cases they will have to ask her opinion. What does she say? She can consult certain spirits, and certain mediums, and they're able to understand that, okay, whatever decision, whatever response comes from her is not coming from her, but it's coming from the spirits. And so they take Ezinna to the oracle, and she also tries to restore the life of Ezinna, at least to keep her so that she stays and she does not die like all the other children of Ikwefu. Now, there's this that's going on, and they take care of Ezinna, and Ezinna indeed does live, on for some time. Now, it so happens that there's an offense which a neighboring village, does or conducts against Umofia. And so because of this offense, the penalty that's decided by the oracle is that they will have the neighboring village will have to hand over a virgin as well as a lad, a sacrificial lad, for to appease for the offense that they'd given. That they'd admitted that to appease for the offense. And so a virgin gets handed over indeed, and the lad which is handed over is Ikemefuna. And it so happens that Ikemefuna, again, because Okonkwo's compound is central in Umuofia and in the storyline as well, Ikemefuna comes and he lives in the compound of Okonkwo. And he lives with Noye, and he gets along with Noye, and he even gets along with Okonkwo. As a matter of fact, Okonkwo loves Ikemefuna because, again, there's something about Ikemefuna. They get along with this boy very well. He even calls Okonkwo father, okay? So there's this bond that is established very quickly with Ikemefuna. However, 3 years down the line, it's decided that now Ikemefuna needs to die. And the oracle calls upon Ikemefuna and he needs to be killed. And a wise old man by the name of Berfu Ezwedu advises Okonkwo, do not take part in the killing of the son, because he even calls you father. Do not take part in his killing. And however, because Okonkwo has a greater need to prove himself, as not weak, to prove himself as man enough, when the oracle calls upon and the other elders are there and this boy is to be killed, Okonkwo does participate in the killing of Ikemefuna. And Noye sees this and he's really affected because he already sees Ikemefuna as his brother. And so he's deeply affected by this. And that act even makes the bond between Okonkwo and Noye, even more fragile, right? It breaks them even more than they already were broken, okay? So it just creates further divide between father and son. And so indeed, Ikemefuna is killed as what it was decided upon. And later, about 3 years later, Ogwefu Ezwedu also dies. Okay, he dies in the marketplace. Unfortunately, he dies in the marketplace. No, he dies, and his funeral, is by the marketplace. And when his funeral is in procession, when the funeral is taking place, Okonkwo, his gun accidentally kills someone in the marketplace. And so, this is the same Okonkwo who's believed that, he's in charge of his own destiny. He is in charge of his own fate. His actions are the ones that decide what happens in his life. And so when this accident happens, which changes his life around, it also shows us, from, the writer is trying to show us that even if you have your life all figured out, there are certain things which no one can control in life. And so Okonkwo learns this the hard way, and he, by accident, someone's life is taken, and because it's an accident, they sort of give him a lighter sentence, but he has to be punished because at the end of the day, someone has lost their life. And so the sentence that Okonkwo receives is 7 years exile. Okay, so he's supposed to flee Umuofia for 7 years, and after 7 years, he can return. And so, he has to leave with his entire household. He leaves and he has to start afresh. He moves to his mother's side, to Mbanto, which is another, village and not so far away. And his uncle Uchendu is the one that helps him to start afresh, helps him to be able to, to at least have some crops that he can plant and, have a piece of land so he can start from, from something. Okay, so he starts his life again in this, in this village from his mother's side. Again, with that, we're seeing how the author was highlighting how the value or the contribution of women, right? Women are the people, or the role of women is that of nurturing, right? Of restoration, of assisting to reintroduce what was taken away, right? So I'm just missing that word. Yeah. So he shows the role of women because now the life of Okonkwo has to start afresh, and his mother's side is where he's able to receive this beginning. His uncle assists him with Uchendu, a very, very wise and principled man, who's not as autocratic, who's not as staunch as what Okonkwo is, but Okonkwo submits to his authority, even though he's not a very, rigid person, but he submits to his authority because of his, nurturing, a role. He submits to his authority because of that. And so in the 7-year period where Okonkwo finds himself in Mbanto, a lot happens, okay? Now, this is quite important. A lot happens, and Okonkwo does not have much power to influence a lot of what is happening. A lot is changing in Umofia, and a lot also changes in Mbanto, but he does not have as much privilege, as much power, because here, he doesn't have as much, authority in Mbanto. So we see Okonkwo sort of being, this person who's seeing a lot of this happening. He wants to contribute. He has a lot to say, but his hands are sort of tied. He can't do much. So in Umofia, what happens is, both in Umofia and Mbanto, there's the arrival of the missionaries. So the missionaries arrive, and, through use of Mr. Kiyaga, who is a local who speaks both languages, who's able to translate, who's able to mediate in discussions, is able to express the needs of both parties, and so he communicates that these missionaries, they don't want to fight, they don't want war, they just want to have a piece of land, so they can build their church, and so they can also establish their government. That's all they want. They're coming in a very peaceful manner, and so a lot of this is happening, and some elders discuss the issue, and because these people are not fighting, there's a lot of controversy, but at the end of the day, hey, they're not fighting. What harm can they give? And so they give them, the evil forest. Okay, we'll discuss more about this in the settings aspect of this part. But yeah, they give them a portion of the evil forest, which is the forest which a lot of the evil sacred was taking place. A lot of the outcasts were being sent. A lot of these punishments, evil spirits, were felt to be living there, and so they sort of are giving them this outcast piece of land, as if, if you guys really must have a portion of our land, let's give you guys that, but we really don't even value your presence here. And so they arrive, they introduce their religion, they introduce their administration, and Okonkwo does not want this, okay? And it's quite interesting. When they arrive and they give him this portion of the evil forest, which it's expected that they're going to suffer and they're going to maybe run away by themselves, and the spirits of the evil forest will just send them away. When these people start flourishing, when they church, lives and nothing happens to the church, it just brings a lot of, suspicion. Like, what are these people? Who are these people? What power are they coming by? And so it creates a divide between the people of the community of both Umofia as well as Mbanto. So some people are actually paying attention to these missionaries and want to hear more of what these missionaries have to say. And some people are still being true to the values of the culture. But also, people which culturally were already being outcast are now finding some solace, right? Okay, there are some people here that are coming and saying that God loves us all, that God cares for us all, that no one is an outcast in the sight of God, right? So we're already outcast, right? We're already, doomed for death in our culture. And hey, this is a way that we can follow. And so a lot of the people, which were outcasts in the cultural setting, almost automatically follow the missionary teachings, and and there's some people which are sort of on the fence also follow, because hey, nothing has happened to these people, there must be something about this. So there is this divide that happens in the community because of the arrival of these missionaries, and it affects Okonkwo a lot, when even his own son Noye, like we said, who was not really on good terms with his father, who follows the teachings of the missionaries. It affects Okonkwo a lot. It makes him even feel helpless in the situation. But at the same time, there's a lot more that's happening. The entire community is now being divided. So all of this is happening in the period when Okonkwo sort of has not much that he can do about it. He's still in his period of exile. He's still in his period of punishment. Now, when that period comes to an end, Okonkwo naturally wants to go back and he wants to rectify certain things. He wants to speak, and restore things the way they were. And so he comes back with that same mentality that he has had the whole time. He comes back to Umofia and he's wanting to, to remind them, guys, this is what we stand for. This is how we do things. These are our cultural values. These are our shared values. You guys are moving away from this. So he's wanting to return with that kind of vigor, with that kind of determination. Okay, like things need to be restored back to the way they were before the arrival of these missionaries. Let's do things the way that we've always done them, according to our own custom, right? And however, when he arrives, he arrives into his amazement. Things have changed. People are no longer, the shared values which used to exist are no longer shared anymore. Now there's a divide. Some people, are listening. Some people are not listening. There's a lot going on. In addition to that, the missionaries and, the white commissioner has also introduced the law of the whites. And so things now are being done in a way which is foreign to the people of Umofia. And, they have the power, they have stronger weapons, and so things are now, done in a totally different way. And so though, Okonkwo feels helpless, he still has this feeling that he can do something about it. And so in an open setting, in the marketplace where, usually the gatherings will take place, meetings will take place, when the white commissioner comes and challenges such meetings and orders them to be cancelled. When an insult is done and one of the spirits who are covered, culturally, which are respected, which are now, being unveiled by the outcasts, which are followers of the missionaries, when all of this is happening and Okonkwo wants to do something about it, when he takes a stance, and he raises his machete and he kills a person in this open place, which in previous settings would have been supported by the community. He is very much disappointed to see that not only is his stance not supported, but it is also being questioned. People are asking, why did he do it? Right? So people are not even understanding the values which he has always upheld. In other words, they don't understand their own values. And it makes Okonkwo feel as if, he most likely is the outcast in the situation. And so, following that situation, knowing that because these people are not standing up for him, most likely they're even going to sell him out, So he goes and he, from that scene, he goes and he hangs himself. Hanging himself, number one, because he doesn't want, to be killed by the white. His pride will not let him do that. And secondly, because, he's so much disappointed, in the people. He doesn't even know, his own sense of belonging here. Who are these people, that I fought, I was fighting for my people, and yet now they can't even stand to be in support of me. And so he's affected by that, and he feels as if there's no place for him in this kind of a society anymore. And so he takes his life, and that's how this tragic novel ends. And he becomes like this tragic hero of the story. And so that's the summary of Things Fall Apart. And in the next session, we want to discuss the plot, the theme, in the settings, and such things of Things Fall Apart. Okay, and then the plot, the theme, the setting, and such. Okay, this is part 2 of African Literature Analysis series. And in this section, we're going to be looking in discussing the academic part of things. Once again, if you haven't already, please do like, subscribe, share your comments in this comment section below. And let's continue to learn together. I really get excited to read and to hear more of people's analysis of African literature. In fact, of literature, it's quite it's quite amazing, when you also add your own critical thinking to it, when you also add your own experiences, your own analysis, your own, views, it becomes quite interesting. It becomes, worth the discussions. So yes, do share in the comment section below. Let's continue to learn together. Okay, in the plot analysis, we'll be looking at the exposition, the characters, setting the problem, the solution, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, as well as the resolution. Okay, let's actually begin with the exposition. In the exposition, we must begin with Unoka, Okonkwo's father, because he's the one that shapes, the paradigm of Okonkwo, because Okonkwo saw how his father, how meaningless the contribution his father made. And so what informs his own understanding is the fact that his father didn't do, his father didn't have, right? And his father left such a meaningless, start for him, and such that he decides he needs to do something much better. If he lives to be much better than his father, way better than his father, then he has made it in life. So one of the main characters is Unoka, okay? He's not necessarily, a leading character, but he's main, is central in us understanding Okonkwo. And then we have the tragic hero himself, Okonkwo, as well as he has 3 wives. We look at his children. There is his firstborn son, Nwoye, who is sort of different from how he is. Okonkwo is, a hard worker. He believes that he's his own savior. He needs to give in. He needs to work hard. Whatever he wants in life, he needs to work very hard to get it. And his son, Nwoye, on the other hand, is sort of like calm, relaxed, and Okonkwo even feels that he reminds him of Unoko. He hates Nwoye. He hates Nwoye because he feels like he reminds him of Unoko, his own father. And so there's Nwoye, his firstborn son, as well as there's Ezinna, his daughter. Now, this is not his first daughter, but this is, a daughter that lives, from his second wife, Ekwefu, who has this condition where she keeps on losing her children. The children don't live very, very long, and they keep on dying. About 10 children have already died, and then comes Ezinna. So by the time Ezinna is born, both Okonkwo as well as Ekwefu, the second wife, are sort of, skeptical. Is she going to live? Please, we really hope this one is going to live. And so they have arrangements with the oracle, which is an older lady who sometimes gets possessed by these divine spiritual powers, and she's able to do supernatural things. And one of the things she does is healing. And so she takes the effort to really, go and travel a long distance by night with Ezinna, wanting to save her life. And seemingly it works, because Ezinna does get to live, a bit longer, or longer than all the other children which Ekwefu has had before. So we see Ezinna, who is also similar in character or in spirit as Okonkwo, because Okonkwo loves, this determination that this girl has. She's got this fighting spirit. I love this about her. Something which I don't see in my son Nwoye, which I despise. Okonkwo has got a friend, Obierika. Okay, Obierika becomes quite instrumental when Okonkwo, is in exile. Okay, he's instrumental in helping, share and give him information and visit him, and so this is a good friend that Okonkwo has, Obierika. We see there also the oracle I've already mentioned, which is this older lady who has divine powers that sometimes overpower her at times. We see Uchendu. Uchendu is now on Okonkwo's mother's side, when Okonkwo goes and lives with when he has to flee Mofia because of now being punished. When he goes and he lives with his parents' family, he lives with his uncle Uchendu. Uchendu takes care of him, helps him to sort of have a start, in the 7-year period where he has to stay away. He at least has something going for himself. And Uchendu is a respected person, right? He's not really as aggressive as Okonkwo, but he has this soft-spoken but respectful approach about him. And Okonkwo submits to him, even though he's not as aggressive as as what he normally would prefer. Okay, so these are some of the main characters. There are also characters, Mr. Kiaga, who comes later in the story. There's also Mr. Smith, who comes, the white commissioner. We find and we learn of those characters later on in the story. Now, the setting, which is quite important in the story, is Umofia, which is a fictional a village in Nigeria. Okay, so this is a village where a lot of people, they come here and they have this shared belief. They've got shared values. And Okonkwo also is in this village. His father is also from this village. So he has established himself in Umofia, and this is the setting that we're seeing. And in Umofia, some prime settings that we see the marketplace, where a lot of the clan meetings take place, the festivities, a lot happens in the marketplace. Also, Okonkwo's own compound, there's a lot happening because, we see a lot of Okonkwo's life, so his compound is also quite central in the setting that we see in this exposition. And the main problem, according to my analysis, the main problem is found in Okonkwo and his own life. So understanding that Okonkwo came from a background of a father who was a no good, right? So he grows up having this need, to fight for his own place in the community. Other people, other sons have got their father to pave the way for them. He didn't have that. So he starts off fighting for himself. He has to start from scratch to prove himself capable. He has to fight for his place in the community. And once he has established himself, he fights to keep what he has worked so hard to establish. So it is essentially, this person who has fought to have an identity in the community and who fights to keep this identity, as he believes this is the shared identity of all the members of the community. So if we're to sum up, the story in a few lines, I would say, it's more of this identity crisis, or this identity urge and this need, which initially needs to be fought to be attained, and then it needs to be fought to be kept, and it becomes lost in the process. But here is the problem that we find in this exposition. So there's this need for Okonkwo to have the sense of belonging in, the village of Umofia, without having a father who has done anything meaningful for him, and also keeping what it is that he has fought to attain. So that's what we find here as the exposition of the story. Okay, so let's move on to the rising action. The rising action, okay, so we see when there was an offense which was committed by a neighboring village, and the offense was for them, or the punishment was for them to hand over a virgin as well as a sacrificial lad. So the rising action we see when the lad is assigned to live with Okonkwo. Okay, so this lad must come and he must live with Okonkwo, and him living with Okonkwo essentially means he has some form of, interaction with the family of Okonkwo for 3 years. And what happens is he has this bond with Okonkwo's son, Noye, and he's able to sort of influence, they get along very well. And there's something also quite, remarkable about this lad who goes by the name Ikemefuna. And so in this period when he's kept in Okonkwo's compound for 3 years, or up until the oracle decides, when to execute him, there's this relationship that's established, between him and Okonkwo's family, as well as between him and Okonkwo, such that he even calls Okonkwo by, father. He addresses him as father. Okay, so there's this bond that takes place between them. So what happens is, when it is decided by the oracle that, oh, by the way, now is the time for us to execute this lad, Ikemefuna, one of the older Izwedu, Befu Izwedu, advises Okonkwo, have nothing to do with the killing of the son, because he calls you father, okay? So have nothing to do with his killing. So we saw that as a rising action. Now, this is innocent advice, but also understanding, Okonkwo and his own fears and his own, limitation and his own need to prove himself, to align with the identity of the community. Okay, so when he's advised not to take part in what all the other leaders will be participating in, it sort of is affecting him. Won't others see him as weak? So he has this crisis that he has to deal with. If I don't do this, I will be seen as weak, and I cannot be seen as weak. This is not, this is totally against my character and what I'm fighting to attain. And so what happens is he still participates, and he's part of the killing of Ikemefuna. And this affects his bond with his own son, Noye. Okay, so it sort of is affecting, another part, because now the bond that he has with Noye, which was already, a bit ruggedy, it becomes worse, because now Noye feels even more disappointed in his father, and, he finds solace in other ways aside from those which are proved by his father. So that's the one area of rising action. Another one takes place when the very same elder, Ogbuefi Ezwedu, who advised Okonkwo not to take part in the killing of Ikemefuna, when he passes on and his funeral procession takes place, and Okonkwo is part of it, by accident, his gun fires out and it kills one of the people in the marketplace. And now, this goes against what Okonkwo has been striving, towards. He's been trying to prove himself. He's been trying to prove that he has got full power over his own life. But now this accident comes and shows, but hey, maybe you don't have all the power over your own life. And so when that happens, there is a punishment which is now being enforced. It's a bit light because it was by accident, but at the same time, someone has lost their life. So punishment must be, must be carried out here. And so for 7 years, Okonkwo must move away, must flee from Umuofia. He's not allowed to live here. He must find another place for 7 years, and that is his punishment. Again, taking out a lot from Okonkwo, because, hey, this is his identity, okay? So for 7 years, he essentially has to find a new identity. He has to remold himself. He has to remake himself for this period of 7 years. It is quite something, that moves Okonkwo quite deeply. And so he moves and he lives with Uchendu. Uchendu, his uncle, arranges for him to, to start from at least a starting point, and is able to, build himself up from there in the period of that 7 years. So he stays there for the 7-year period, and the 7-year period comes to an end. And when the 7-year period comes to an end, now he's ready to return back to Umuofia. At least, his flaws would have been forgiven by now. He'll be allowed and accepted back into the community, because indeed it was by accident that he killed somebody else. And so he moves back, and he, is praying to live in Umuofia back again, to, reconnect with his identity. And when he arrives there, he arrives to quite, some harsh awakenings, like things have changed, okay? The identity of the community has changed. What he used to associate as his own identity now has changed, because, hey, there's a divide that now has taken place in the land of Umuofia. The same divide which came, by the way, in Banto, where he was living for the 7-year period. But at least now Umuofia, this is where he has power. This is where he would have a say. So we see him finding, his feet, trying to, to bring back and resurface the values of the community, right? The values which he has worked so hard, to mold himself by, and he has worked so hard to even retain and enforce, even ensuring that his own family keeps by such values. So he's trying so hard to bring back these values and highlight these values in the people of Umuofia. But things have changed such that it's not the way that he expects. So then we move on to the climax. So the climax takes place where in the same place where, the shared values were always exercised, where the shared values were decided upon, where clan meetings used to take place in the same marketplace where they used to meet, and decisions will be made in alignment with what the community shares as values. In the same place where this is taking place, now there is this huge divide that has taken place, and members of the community are now no longer saying the same thing. There's this divide which has taken place, with others, supporting the white missionary and their teachings, and with others still in line with the teachings of culture. So what happens is the white commissioner sort of offends the clan meetings. Now, it is well known that the spirits, which are dressed in certain coverings and masks and stuff, they do not get touched. But what happens is one of the people, which are now, members of the missionary side, they unveil the spirits, and that's a huge offense. And, on top of that, orders are coming from the white commissioner. They humiliate the clan leaders. They imprison them. They treat them quite unfairly. They tell them, okay, let's have a meeting. Let's sit down for a meeting. But in such a meeting, they actually trick them and capture them and treat them quite unfairly. Now, when all of this is happening, people are like, no, but this is not right. This is not right. And others are still saying, but these white people have got guns. Okay, so what the white missionaries or what the white commissioner had as an advantage is that they had guns, and the people of Umofia had machetes, and it was a different kind of weapon that they were using, and so they were sort of powered, right, because of the kind of weapons that were being used. However, Okonkwo still has this urge, to fight for what it is that he believes in. And so what happens is, when in a clan meeting held at the marketplace, when in such a meeting it is being decided what will happen, what must be done to these people who have offended our culture. When such a meeting is taking place, the white commissioner sends a messenger to go and disrupt such a meeting, tell them to go and part ways. They ordered such a meeting to disperse. And when that is happening, Okonkwo again, who dares come and tells us, to disperse in such a meeting? This is such an important meeting. It's part of our values as a culture, right? We respect such a meeting. And so what Okonkwo does, out of, again, rage, and his inability to express himself. Remember, he started, right? He was a person who, when he's really in rage, he's not able to speak up. He resorts to violence because, this is a language that's, again, understood better than words sometimes. And so in this crucial moment, he wants to express himself. He wants to express his frustration. He cannot. He's stuttering. And then he uses his machete. He kills the messenger. And he's expecting that because he's standing for the right, for the dignity, for the identity of the community, he's expecting that he's going to be supported by the community. He's expecting that people are going to capture the others. He's expecting that this is starting war, and then we're going to go out there and we're gonna, leave our mark. Instead, to his amazement, what happens is people are not in support of this. They let the commissioner people run away, right? The people that were sent to send this message, they ran away. And he's now essentially being treated as an outcast. And he's not just not being supported, but on top of not being supported by, the people of the clan, they even are questioning, why did he do what he did? As if they don't even understand, as if they don't even, they're not even cut from the same cloth anymore, as if the values which he has been fighting so hard to keep, they don't subscribe to such values anymore. And so he doesn't understand this. It affects him so much and so deeply. For him, it affects his deeper identity such that, after that point, he can't, associate with that anymore. So that part becomes the huge climax when he makes the stand, this bold stand, knowing that it could cost his life, but he's doing it for the sake of the community, for the sake of leaving a mark, of showing the value of the identity of the community. And in return, he is treated as an outcast. He's left as an individual who is not supported by the rest of the community. So that's what happens, in the climax, and it affects him in such a deep way. So in the falling action, Okonkwo detaches himself from the community, and he just goes back to his compound, his only place, the only place where at least he feels as if his identity, is still sort of intact, is still understood in his own compound, and he goes back there and he hangs himself. He takes his life. Number one, he does not understand his identity, with the community anymore. And number two, he will not allow himself to be killed, by the white forces. So he'll rather take his own life, but he's deeply affected, and his identity is deep and truest identity, which he's worked so hard, to first, attain and retain, has now been lost. And so he just takes his life, and that's how the tragic story ends. Okay, so he ends his own life. And then in the resolution, basically, it's a sad ending, especially considering the fact that we know it is based on a truthful account, of a lost identity of a community. And so it just presents this in a very hurtful way, like, could it be? Could it be that the identity of, the African, the Nigerian in this particular context could have been lost for good, because when he takes his life, that's just for good now, whatever he would have been fighting for is not going to continue anymore because he's taken his own life. Okay, so in the resolution, again, we see how from where we began in the exposition that Okonkwo was trying so hard to have this identity with the Omofoya people, not being given one by his father as what the custom would have entailed. And we saw him trying so hard to keep to this identity, wanting to even build himself up, work up, ranks, move up ranks, get, higher recognition, become, a person of high stature, in the community, within this identity, which is worked so hard to be a part of. And we see how when this identity to him is seemingly lost, how he feels as if his life is just meaningless, he feels as if his life loses value because the one thing which he was identifying himself with no longer is there for him anymore. And so that's how the story ends. And like I said, it just makes you feel, it makes you question as the African, if you, especially in a country where that some of these things are taking place, that the identity of your people, was affected, the identity of your people was wrongfully, taken away, and the norms and the ways and the doings of your people, were sort of being removed, that identity was lost. It just leaves that question, could it be lost for good? Is there a way that it could be restored? Unfortunately, the story ends in such a way. We don't see if later on Azimna, for example, who had the same spirit as Okonkwo, we don't see, her necessarily doing anything about it. Maybe if there was a part 2 in the book, we could have seen Azimna, rising up and speaking up, because number one, she's of the younger generation, and number two, she's female, but definitely she shares the same spirit as her father, so if it would have been interesting to have seen a part 2 of Things Fall Apart from the perspective of Azimna, and seeing how, this affected her and what maybe could have transpired from her retaining that same identity. And it would have been interesting to see what would have happened. But unfortunately, in this particular story, it ends with Okonkwo, and after it ends, it actually gives you as the reader that huge that ghastly feeling, like that, really? Yeah, but unfortunately, really, that's how it is, because again, it's based on a truthful account, which in some cases is still taking place. And even though, we're trying to find ways around it, there still are effects of, the colonialism, imperialism. We still are finding all of that, even in our African settings today. So, I believe more than anything else, this kind of book is a good starting point for those kind of discussions and debates. What needs to be done? What needs to be done to restore the identity of the African? To bring it back to what it rightfully should have been, and what role can everybody play? We can't point fingers at Okonkwo and say he should have. Yes, he did his part, but hey, what role can we play? As the current generation as well. As every African, what role can we play? Towards the greater cause of the African identity. So yeah, these are some of the topics which come up from this book, which become quite interesting. When undertaken in panels of people that are really quite well vexed in such topics. It becomes quite interesting to share further debates on such topics. But yes, that is how Okonkwo, that is how things fall apart, and that's how Professor Chinua Achebe has chosen to end this book. He has chosen to end it in an open-ended approach. It leaves it to your interpretation as to how it actually would end. Okay, so the themes that we find in the book, so I'm going to start with identity. So Okonkwo begins with having an identity, of a person who's raised by a father who had no inheritance for them, So it is a not so flourished beginning, It's just a basic, in fact, it's a negative beginning, because the father left debt for Okonkwo, so more than anything else, he had to first start off by attending to his own father's debt. And his father died in a humiliating way, and he wanted nothing to do with his own father. And so the one person which people really, when we start off in the world, at least you want to have the right identity, which you're going to receive from your father, he does not have that. He begins by not having that kind of an identity, and the one that he has, he does not really appreciate. He wants nothing to do with it, and so he begins off by wanting to shape his own identity. He wants to form his own identity, which is going to be one rather in line with the community. So he wants to attach to the shared identity of the community, without starting off or being assisted by his own father. So he starts off with the identity of his own hard work, his own effort, him believing that he has to be the one to do everything for himself. And so that is, one of the first themes that we find there, an issue of identity, Who are you? What do you associate with who you are? How do you want to be known? How do you want to be remembered? Okay, these are, questions, or these are issues which Okonkwo deals with, and he wants nothing, to do with his father, but he wants to create something much better and more meaningful for himself, which he does. Okay, so it begins by showing him doing that in a very positive way. And so in the beginning part, we really get to appreciate Okonkwo, for having done that for himself, and not sitting back and saying, "Oh, my father didn't do this for me." No, but he does this for himself, okay? And it becomes a huge shaper of who he is. Now, in line with him keeping or aligning with this identity, he actually has to work hard. And so a huge trait which we see in the character of Okonkwo is that of hard work, resilience, determination, even aggression, okay? He has to do things in a certain way. He can't allow even his own weakness to take over. He has a weakness of, stuttering, he has a weakness maybe of even having a shorter temper, because he can't express himself in words, so he expresses himself in actions. And he has this, but he works so hard, and he's awarded and rewarded for his hard work, because hard work pays, right? So he grows up living and understanding and experiencing that hard work pays, and it's going to make a difference in his life. And so he uses this, and it becomes a huge part of his own identity, and it becomes a huge part of who, he wants his own children to become. He wants his children to follow such a legacy and not be like his own father. Okay, so we see this hard work and determination that is just a huge part of Okonkwo's lifestyle and in all of his dealings quite consistently. Again, Power and dominance. He leads in an autocratic way. He leads his family in an autocratic way. His kids, it's my word or the highway. You've got to do things the way that I tell you to do them, because I'm the father, and I've proven myself. You must listen to me and you must do things the way that I tell you guys to do them. In fact, the community also is one of power. People don't question certain things. When the clan leaders have spoken, you don't question, because again, it's a hierarchy. There's power. The higher forces of power, or how those representing higher levels of power, when they've spoken, you don't question it, because you are disregarding their power. So the community, the shared values of the community, do include power. They do include dominance. They do include hierarchy. Okay, we listen and we do things in a certain specific way, and this is how they've always been done, and this is how they will always be done. And so there's that, which is a huge part of the culture, and the values which are shared in the community. And then there is the religion, which also is a theme, which becomes, a double-sided coin, right? On the one part, it brings liberty to those which were previously, outcasts, the twins, for example, which were, if you're born a twin, you were just being cast out, okay, because, hey, we don't associate with your kind, so there were other people which were outcasts, and the religion came and said no one will be an outcast. So for them, religion became this place of solace. It became this place of peace. It became this place, of liberty. It became this place, where they can find, rest, where they can have a second chance. It became, their true savior. Hey, you know what? We also have a second chance. No one is going to judge us anymore, right? So religion came and it provided liberty, for those especially which were previously outcast. But at the same time, the same religion arrives and it now wants to take away from the rights and the freedom of the people. So those which are already part of the community, those which were already in line with the identity of the community and the shared values, now they are the ones which are being compromised by this new religion, because this new religion says, hey, we do things differently. You don't do that. Your ways are barbaric. This is how things are done now. Because, Christ died for everybody. This is how we do things. And so the religion comes, and on the one part, it assists a certain kind of people, and on another part, it comes and it takes away, from the identity of the core people. And so it creates this divide, this huge divide, which is being introduced by religion. Okay, there's the issue of unity again, because of this religion which comes and separates, and because of the arrival of the whites, which come, carrying machine guns, guns which are more powerful than machetes. And when they come and they're able to kill and they have, stronger impact, they come and they create, they take away from the unity of the people. So these people previously were united, they would speak one, there was a certain understood way of doing things, and things were decided in, the marketplace, in clan meetings. And so now, because of this religion, the white commissioner comes and says, okay, we're bringing our religion, we're bringing our British rule, okay, we're bringing our administration, our law. This is how we do things. And so because of that, the unity of the people, was impaired. It was compromised. Okay, so now people are divided. Some are seeing value in this because it's assisting them, and others are seeing that this is taking away, and others just don't have a choice because, hey, there are guns here. We're not really being asked here. We are being told this is how things are going to be, and our leaders have already accepted this. They have signed treaties. We must do things for our own lives' sake. And then there was also the theme of unfairness. Okay, so though the British rule comes and presents Christ, which is supposed to represent fairness and love for all community, this fairness and love for all is not really a fairness and love for all. It is actually a fairness, and love which is in favor of British rule. So they're wanting to manipulate people by use of religion. So it is a flawed religion that they're introducing here, just playing mind games with the people. So we see this happening here, and the teachings of the people, the cultural norms of the people are being challenged publicly by the white commissioner, and so this fairness takes place, and it takes away from the people and what was originally there. So these are some of the themes that we find in this book, and again, what are people going to do about it? Can people do anything about it, right? Could have added even corruption, right? There's corruption that takes place. There's a lot that is happening here. Some political unrest. A lot of these things are happening here. But these are the ones that I felt I should specifically point out as the main themes which are discussed in the book, Things Fall Apart. Do share any other theme that you picked up. Let us continue to, learn from this together. Okay, so the setting in Things Fall Apart, we find that for the most part, it begins in Okonkwo's compound, where, here's this young person who's wanting to find his feet, who's wanting to have an identity. His parents left, his father specifically left nothing meaningful for him. And this is him needing to find his feet, and he has to work hard, right? He has to be part of certain fights. He has to be part of certain meetings. He has to be established as a leader. He needs to find his feet. So it begins in Okonkwo's compound. It begins with us understanding this protagonist here, Okonkwo. It begins with us understanding who he is. A couple of his a bit about his character, a couple of his flaws, just who he is. It begins with us understanding, and it begins in his own compound. And now this is in Umuofia. Umuofia is now this fictional village, which is in Nigeria, where, the people there have got this shared value of hard work and, sharing certain cultural beliefs, like every other, village setting. Okay, so this is, there's one village of Umuofia, and Okonkwo is from the village of Umuofia, as well as his father was from the village of Umuofia. So he's finding his feet, he's establishing himself in the village of Umuofia, and he, because he understands, their teachings and their values, he easily aligns himself, and he knows that they stem from hard work, and so he works very hard, and so he forms an identity, in Umuofia. Okay, so this is a very big and central part of the book and of Okonkwo's own life. Okay, we find Umuofia. Now, in Umuofia is the marketplace. Now, the marketplace, again, because many people live in different parts of Umuofia, the marketplace is sort of central in Umuofia. So a lot of people are able to come from different parts of Umuofia. Clan meetings will take place there. Celebrations will take place there. We saw there was an account where there was a funeral procession. It goes past the marketplace because it seems to be a central location in Umuofia, and so again it makes sense that a lot of activities will be taking place in this place. And so we see again, this is the place of, excitement, of celebration. When these people are coming together, it represents collectively, it represents their unity. So this is the place where they're able to come together as a people and speak with one voice and come to one decision and stick to that decision. And whoever is not part of this collective, becomes the outcast. Okay, so this becomes an important part of Umuofia. This marketplace becomes an important part of Umuofia. And then there is Mbanto, which is Okonkwo's mother's family side, where we find also Uchendu, when Okonkwo is cast out of the market of Umuofia, not being cast out completely, but temporarily being cast out. He flees to Mbanto, his mother's family side, and so he lives there for a period of 7 years while he's in exile. We see that place as the place where Okonkwo is able to, restore himself, where he's able to, recreate himself, where he's able to at least have a start. Okay, so it's it's being shown as a place of nourishment, as a place of nurture. Okay, so the side of the woman, the side of the mother, is being shown as the place of nurture and of care. Okay, so when a person is wounded, they're able to go to their mother side and they're able to receive that motherly care. So Mbanto sort of represents that motherly care, that place where he's able to find, that solace and that comfort that, okay, it's okay, you are hurt now, but it's going to be okay. So he receives that on the mother side, something which he's not able to receive from Umofia, which is a more, power, autocratic, authoritative village. Okay, so Mbanto comes as a softer, kind of a village. As a matter of fact, Uchendu, who is Okonko's uncle, also is presented as a character who's sort of soft-spoken. He's principled, right? He's principled. Okonko subdues to him, but at the same time, he's not as aggressive as a person would be from Umofia's side. So again, Mbanto is presented as the people, with the soft and the tenderness. Okay, so it's that tender side of the village. And we also see another setting, which is the evil forest. The evil forest, again, this is the place where, the outcasts are being sent. If there is harsh punishment, which is meant for you, okay, most likely it's going to be carried out in the evil forest, okay? There's so many, there's the evil sacred that's taking place in the evil forest. So a lot is expected that will, take away someone's life or, just bad luck and forbiddenness takes place in the evil forest, which is why the forbidden twins, when twins are born, they're being cast in the evil forest, because these are taboos. Things which are taboos, those are the kind of things which are sent, are dealt by the spirits and the people who are in the evil forest. Okay, so there's that part of things. As a matter of fact, when the community when they first receive Mr. Kiyaga and the white men, when they're wanting a piece of land, the community says, you know what, maybe let's give them a portion of the evil forest, okay? And then that way, we don't have to fight them because they're not necessarily fighting us, but at the same time, they will know by themselves to go, because there are a lot of evil forces that are there. So it was a way of the community saying, we don't want you here, but we're not going to tell you straight, you know what, go and deal with the spirits, in the evil forest. And so when nothing happened to them, when, they were able to build their churches in the evil forest, it sort of changed a lot of things, okay? Like it changed the power of the missionaries in contrast to the power of the evil spirits. Okay, so now people were questioning, how is it that these people are able to bring a foreign god, and dwell with these spirits and not be tainted and not be killed? Okay, so it must say something about their God, about this God that they are supposedly bringing. And so, that part, brought a bit of, a thought-provoke. It brought a bit of controversy in the community, and now the community was divided in two. Wait a minute. So what are these people bringing? How is it that these people are not afraid of these spirits? How is it that their gods are not afraid of these spirits? There must be something about them. And so we see how the community was divided by the mere fact that setting, okay, that setting of the evil and the sacred spirits was now sort of being overpowered and overthrown, by the arrival of these missionaries and their Bible and their mention of God, okay, of Jesus Christ. And so that's what happened. That's another setting here, which goes on and influences the rest of the community, not just the evil forest anymore. It influences the people which used to have their fate, decided in the evil forest. Now they have a second chance. It influences people, who lost their loved ones to the evil forest, okay? So a lot of people were affected by the things which were being done in the evil forest. And so it just changed a lot of things for so many people, and it created that huge divide in the community. And so it affected people in Banto, it affected people in Umofia, it just affected the entire identity of the people, okay? It questioned a lot of things, and there was this divide that took place because of that. Okay, so after the evil forest, another okay, again, if you follow the story from the evil forest, it goes back to marketplace and such places. But ultimately, the story ends again in Okonkwo's compound, okay, where after he felt as if he was defeated, publicly defeated in the marketplace, by the same people that he's standing for, that he's expecting will, be on his side, when they don't stand for him in return, he then turns around and, he goes back to his own compound, and that is where he takes his life. So it began in his compound, it ends in his compound, where again he goes and he takes his life. And there's some interest, would it continue from his compound if there were to be, another part, part two of Things Fall Apart. So yes, that's what happened. These are the major settings that we find in the book Things Fall Apart. Do share your favorite one. Once again, if you have not yet subscribed, liked, shared, please do so that we're able to grow as a channel as well. Now, some discussion points where, people, maybe we agree to disagree here, or, we leave it, or, but where there's always a discussion, okay, where people will actually want to know, right, why this, okay, some controversial points which may be raised by the book. One of them is violence against women. If you were to notice, for example, here in the book, it's sort of portrayed as if violence is okay, right? Okonkwo leads his life in a very strict manner. I do whatever I want. Everybody does, as they're told. I have 3 wives. They abide by my law, and that's it. They don't ever say. And so there was a point where, for example, the third wife wanted to do her hair, and it happened to fall within the peace week. And Okonkwo goes and he beats the wife, and he gets punished, or there's some consequence because of the fact that it's the peace week. But had it not been because of that, he would have even gotten away with it, because hey, such was a norm. But now, is such a norm? Should such be a norm? So a person would easily say, but why is such a book, speaking so casually on violence against women, as if it's something that's okay, that as if it's something that should be accepted as a norm in society. We don't see anyone being cast in the evil forest because of beating a woman, or doing anything that's evil or wrong against a woman. But hey, some things are done which affect women, and they would be part of what gets thrown in the evil forest. But there's nothing that is sort of vindicating against the cause of the woman. And again, when you look at this to the defense of the author, Professor Chinua Achebe, you get to understand that this is not necessarily him trying to create a culture. This is him actually raising awareness of something that actually has been happening. In some cases, it still is like that. Women still don't have a say. In some cases, women still gets beaten, and they have to abide by what the husband says. So in this particular part, though unpleasant as it is, it actually is part of what the reader is using, the author is using, to showcase what is going on in the society, which is wrong. So if we see something is wrong, for example, we see how it's wrong to be violent against women, it's not to say that it's okay. The author is saying it's okay. No, it's not okay. He's highlighting for us to see that this is actually happening. So when we do something about the one part that's addressed in the book, let us also do something about this part too, Yeah, so again, if you realize there are a lot of issues which are addressed in the book, which are not necessarily solved, but they're raised, okay? So it raises the awareness so a discussion can take place. So we can start talking and saying, hey, what about this one? Why is this okay? Why is this being done? So we find a solution, Nowadays, women are a lot more vocal, than, it was the case back in the day. And so nowadays, even, women can actually do something, for the cause of women, which is why I was even saying earlier that the way the story ends, we can easily say or see the possibility of how even a Zimna, that woman, Okonkwo's daughter, could have easily been the one to carry out the legacy, because you know what, nowadays in the new society, even women have the power to make a difference. So yes, there's this violence against women. It's not to say it's okay. It is not okay. It is never going to be okay, but it is something that has been happening, and the author has decided to raise awareness of this one. Also, again, violence and unfairness treatment against those who are weak. So, for example, you are born and you are a twin. It's not your fault. You are born and you are disabled. It's not your fault. Okay, you are born, maybe you're albino. It's not your fault. So there was this violence against the weak. Those which are not strong enough for the community. They are outcasts, and so which is why it was easy for such people, to be the ones that easily join the new religion, because hey, the current community, the current culture was not accommodating them in any way. Okay, so there's that. Again, the author is raising awareness of such. It's not to say it's okay. It is to say, here's the awareness that's been raised. What are we going to do about it as the people who are here? Again, the purpose of literature is to raise that awareness, okay? To bring up, to surface these topics so that we start talking about them. And then we are the ones who can do something about it as well. Again, the significance of Okonkwo's death, at the time when it happened, at the time when this person has been trying so hard to regain and to remold and surface the identity of the community, which was sort of being lost, because of his own weaknesses, he goes and he takes away his own life, So him dying, again, it can easily show that no one is perfect. No one has the ability to can take over and make that impact all by themselves. Immediately when you assume as if you can do everything by yourself, yes, you can, but only to a certain extent. But we can't do a much greater impact by ourselves. We need to all give in our part. We need to remain united. We need to have this shared. We need to all work towards it, and work towards making a difference together. And so, when Okonkwo dies, again, he sees that himself, he's not capable to do much by himself, and he's clearly now an outcast. And as an outcast, he knows he doesn't have much power by himself, and he will not allow himself, to be killed by white power and white supremacy. And so that's what he decides. Instead, again, not to say it is the only thing he could have done, not to say it was the best thing he did, but to say that at that time, given the mindset that he was at, given what he knew, and his own personal cause and his own personal weaknesses, this is what he arrived at doing. Again, what are we going to learn from it? Are we going, when we are in a situation where our identity is also being challenged like that, what do we do about it? Do we take our own life and the cause, or do we find a way? Is there a way that we can come together and fix certain issues, even if it feels as if we are on our own? So there's a lot that's been raised here, which we as a society can sit and use as base for discussion and come, together towards more effective solutions that we can, devise for ourselves and our own cause as an African community. Can I put it that way? Yeah. All right. So yes. So these are the points I wanted to share. Please, again, share your views. Okay. The purpose of this is for us to share and share our views and discuss such and learn together and see how we can influence each other's paradigms, and what we can do and how we can shape each other's lives altogether. Okay, and on the last part, we look at some questions which were brought up. Okay, maybe you can help me with two questions. Okay, I've got two questions, and I'll appreciate if you can share your responses here. I'll see your answers to any of the two, or even both. Maybe it could help myself as well, and maybe other people who would have an interest in these kind of discussions. Now, the first question I wanted to ask is, what's the significance? What's the significance of the white missionaries flourishing in the evil forest? Now, this is coming from the standpoint of saying that while a lot of what was being shared here was actually a truthful account. So it actually could have been that there really, were missionaries who came and they really, established themselves in and they were giving this evil forest. And considering how it really says a lot of, their God, and, because these are sacred mediums or sacred powers that are in place here. So it really, brings that question as to how, would it really imply that it must have been the right time, that as if this was something that was sort of predestined to happen, that it was supposed to have happened, that missionaries come and they take over. Because had it been in any other way, had they been just forced through use of guns and stuff like that, it would have been one aspect of the story. But now there was this element of them being given this evil forest, and their gods sort of comes and overpowers this. Or was it to say the evil forest was no longer evil anymore? Or there's just so much that a person would actually ask themselves, like, why, what's the significance of this now affecting them, and them just going there as if it's a normal forest, whereas everybody else was afraid of this and they knew about this. Or maybe at some point it was, something had happened, and then afterwards whatever was there was gone. It just brings some questions which are unanswered. And if anybody in the community knows, do feel free to share. We can be learning from each other then. Another question. Now, this happens all the time, because I believe that no one from another culture can come and influence another culture without assistance from that culture. So, for example, in this case comes Mr. Kiaga. He comes and he already can speak the language, okay? He speaks the language, the Igbo language, and he also understands the language of the missionaries, and he's loyal to the missionaries. And so, he's sort of working for the cause of the missionaries, and he's also translating to the people. And without the presence of Mr. Kiaga, this would have been a different kind of an interaction. But he comes and is able to explain what is happening, and I even would ask myself, at which point did he go and learn, this language? At which point was he, loyal to the missionaries? At which point did he even lose his identity? Now, I know that's not necessarily part of the storyline, but it brings that question, because again, this seems to be something that happens a lot of the times. There is normally an African who would come and will be the entry point by which the whites are able to enter and they take over. There's normally that one local person that helps to make this process a lot easier. So in this case, like I said, Mr. Kiaga, I'm interested. How is it? Again, he's a fictional character as well, so it could be up to anyone's interpretation. But I just found it interesting, how there will be